Hi, welcome. Great. I think we've got quite a lot of people joining us today. I think there's a couple more still trickling in, but I think we will get started because we've got quite a lot that we want to cover today. But thanks so much to those of you that are here, and I can see quite a lot of new names and some familiar names as well just joining us. So it's really fantastic to see you all here. My name's Ellie. I'm the Business Development Manager here at the Social Mobility Foundation. Some of you might recognise my name. I've been at the SMF for over 7 years now, working across our mentoring programmes and also with some of our employer partners. But for those of you who don't know me or haven't met me before, I'm here today because I'm working closely with our index team to support employers on their social mobility journeys, share information about the index, how and why to enter, which is sort of the whole point of today's session as well. So it's really lovely to see lots of people joining us today. It is a webinar, so we can't see or hear you. We're just broadcasting. So if you've got any questions, any comments, anything you want to say to us, do pop it in the Q&A function, joined by my lovely colleague Sophie, who's collating all of those, and we'll be leaving plenty of time to answer all of your questions at the end. So thanks so much to those of you that are here and already questions in the chat. It's really great to see. Hello and welcome. I think we'll kick off because, like I said, lots to cover today, and we want to leave plenty of time for questions. So we'll make a start. So, as an overview, in today's session, I'm going to be giving you an introduction to the Social Mobility Foundation's Employer Index, talking about reasons to enter, a couple of tweaks, couple of changes for this year, and also really crucially, the practicalities, the nitty gritty of the submission process for those of you that haven't done it before. Like I said, to those of you that are still dialing in, we've got a couple of people trickling in. We can't see or hear you, so do pop questions in the Q&A function, and we're leaving plenty of time to get around to all of those at the end. We really want to hear from you what's most useful for us to discuss and go into a little bit more detail. So my colleagues are collating those for you throughout the session. I'm absolutely delighted though, because we are joined by our CEO, Sarah Atkinson, on the call today. Sarah's agreed to give a brief introduction and welcome, set the scene for why we're doing this, our mission, and then I'll be running through all the next steps. So thank you so much, Sarah, and straight over to you to kick us off.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. It's brilliant to see so many of you on the call. Yeah, I'm going to join Ellie in welcoming you to the webinar, and thank you for being here and taking this first step on the journey to being part of the Social Mobility Employer Index for 2025. Now, I know some of you are here because you would be first-time entrants and you're here to find out a bit more about what's involved. You may be still making a decision. So I know that all the information we're going to share and the opportunity to answer your questions, I hope will support and convince you today how much you'll benefit from the advice and support that we can offer you being part of our index community. Some of you I know are returners. You'll already have a good understanding of what's involved, and you are coming back because you already know the benefits of being part of the index community and all the advice and feedback that we can offer you. You're probably here to find out what's changed this year and probably to drill in with some detailed questions. Again, happy to support you on this webinar, and I know the team is ready to share all that and answer all those questions, so we will get to those. The index is our flagship service for employers who want to take steps on their social mobility journey, implement their action plan, and whatever stage you are at, whether you are right at the beginning of this journey or your practice is really mature and you want to push and lead the pack, we are here to support you. So by being part of the index community, you will benefit from the external validation, the benchmarking that we give you with our expertise and the detailed advice that we offer. You'll also get access to loads of practical advice, case studies, and examples of good practice from across the community. We benefit as well from you being part of this community. We benefit as a charity from the fees that you pay us that go towards our work to improve social mobility. We benefit from having you in our community to be able to share examples of what you're doing, the good things that you're doing, and the support and help that you need. And it enables us to influence government and regulatory practice and policy so that across the board we improve social mobility. So it's a win-win for everybody, and I'm really grateful to you to being part of it. Team's going to take you through all the information you need and explain the changes and improvements we're making this year, including, I'm delighted to say, and those of you who are returners will be delighted to hear, some improvements to the entry platform and the employer experience to streamline your experience of being part of this. And again, the contributions that you make paying to be part of the index go into improving that service that we can offer. So it's easier to enter your data and give us your information, and quicker to get to the point where you get that crucial advice. So thank you for being part of that. Really great to see so many people here, and I'm looking forward to getting into the questions. That's all from me, and I'll see you all later on in the webinar. Thanks, Ellie.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you so much. So yeah, let's dive straight in then with a little bit more information about the index. As Sarah was just saying, and I'm sure you're all aware, for many in the UK, your background, where you grew up, what your parents do, where you went to school, still dictates your chances in life and where you end up and what you end up doing. Even before the pandemic, social mobility was stagnating, but now we're actually seeing that it really is in decline. So urgent action across civil society is needed to ensure that we as a group, as a collective, as a nation, we don't fail a generation of young people. So where does the index come into this, and where does your participation in the index come into this? So the index is a very important independent benchmarking initiative that essentially ranks entrants and employers based on the actions they're taking to ensure that you're open to initially, but then also accessing and progressing talent from across all backgrounds. And then we showcase that progress, that best practice towards improving social mobility. So here at the Social Mobility Foundation, we believe, we think it is the morally right thing to do. The workplace is just as important as the classroom in improving social mobility in our society, but it also it makes a lot of sense. So businesses that join the index, you're acting to improve socioeconomic diversity, that will benefit you because it means you're going to be attracting and retaining brilliant people who value employers who are putting people before polish and potential before polish. And it will also make you more successful, more efficient, and more profitable overall as businesses. The index is now the leading authority on employer-led social mobility in the UK. So when you join, when you participate, you benefit from the expert support, the guidance, the advice that we give that's tailored to you. And it means that any changes that you bring, any feedback you implement will really be making meaningful change across your organization. And that's the case, just as Sarah was saying, wherever you are on your social mobility journey, whether you're just at the beginning and you're looking to benchmark yourself, get some insights into best practice, or if you're slightly later stages and you just want to tweak some of your strategy, get some input or some soundboarding around some new initiatives, we at the SMF, our social mobility experts, but also the network that you're joining is there to support you and be part of that journey with you, essentially. But now more than ever, I've seen it throughout my time at the SMF, more businesses are getting involved, regulators, and now the government, everyone's realizing the really, crucial role of the workplace in advancing social mobility. So now is the best time to join the movement, start getting involved, become a leader and a trailblazer in best practice in your sector and in your industry. So practically then, when entering, you will, once you've submitted, you will receive a feedback report which highlights the areas that you've performed well in, and also really importantly highlights the areas where improvements can be made, and also how your organization performs compared with other index entrants. And it's throughout each section, so that feedback report is quite a meaty piece going through each of the different areas and giving that areas to focus on and kind of comparing the performance according to each. Having said that, you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be doing everything across all of the sections, and you certainly do not have to have all your ducks in a row to be able to enter. If you're at the beginning of your social mobility journey, many of you will be, the index helps you to further formulate your strategy. It sets out, the basic foundations, give you ideas for next step, and offers you all of that best practice information as well. Of course, those who are returning, maybe you started to implement some feedback, you're starting to think about continuing to improve and getting our support on certain initiatives. Wherever you're at in your journey, the practical insights will help you drive that change. And last year, 66% of our index entrants were employers who had entered previously, maybe not every year, but they had entered before. And it just goes to show, that the insights that we offer and that we give are part of this longer social mobility journey to improving social mobility and kind of refining that best practice as well. So, what is the actual process? How do you actually enter? What are the details? So, the index this year will be open for submissions on Tuesday, the 11th of March at 9 a.m. and it will close on Monday, the 9th of June at midnight. During that period, our index team are on hand to help. We've got a dedicated team at the SMF who can help support your submission and answer questions. But you can also, if you haven't already done so, register on our website. It means you'll be on our mailing list. We'll send you next steps. We'll send you reminders. There'll be the link to access the new portal once that goes live in the middle of Feb. More on that in a second. And then you'll also be able to send you some resources, FAQs, things to help you get started. Once Index opens officially on the 11th of March, you'll be able to access the survey, see the questionnaire on the portal, and then you'll be able to start recording your answers, covering off all of the information that's requested according to the different 8 sections, which I'm going to go through in more detail in just a moment. As a minimum, in order to get the feedback report, you are required to complete one of the sections and the opening organizational information. So you don't have to complete everything across all of the sections. It's still a valuable exercise because you'll still get all of the best practice recommendations from the whole survey, not just the sections that you've completed where you'd be getting specific feedback. Once it closes in June, the SMF then has the whole summer to mark the responses, benchmark your submission, collate all of that feedback. We go through every single submission one by one, so it takes a very long time. That's why we have the whole summer to do that. And then it's in October that you will get your individual feedback report and your provisional ranking as well. Once we've done that, we'll then publish the top 75 later in the autumn. Last year we had a launch event, a launch webinar, which was also a really great way to celebrate best practice and the research that had been done as well. You can enter anonymously. That's really important to note because it means you still get all the same level of feedback, but we don't disclose your participation. Of course, if you rank outside the top 75, your participation isn't disclosed anyway. We only publish the top 75. But if you end up ranking higher and you want to then waive your anonymity, that's absolutely fine. We can discuss that. We're very flexible about that as well. Okay, so we've sort of teased that there is a new portal, but what is it actually going to look like in practice? We're absolutely delighted. We're really, really excited about the new Index web portal for 2025. Those of you that have done it before will, I'm sure, also be equally excited about it because it's very much new and improved. This on the screen is a screenshot. It's just the pre-production version, just to give you a taste of what you can expect. But it will be fully operational ahead of the Index launch. This is essentially, the portal is basically where the survey is hosted this year, and you'll be able to log in using a username and a password, make a start, save, log out, resume at any point. You can also download the questions. I know a lot of employers like to circulate a downloaded copy for collaboration across different teams. You can absolutely do that. It will be possible to do that off the portal. And then you can just complete your final submission on the portal once you've done that, but all very easy and quick. The portal also will have reminders about the opening and closing dates. It'll have FAQs hosted on there. It'll also signpost you to contact details for the SMF team that we can help you with, and also very excitingly a suite of social mobility research and resources. that will help you kind of push you and test you in your submission, but also means then you'll still have access to this once the index is closed. So you can still digest those, reflect, continue to develop your social mobility strategy whilst you wait for your bespoke key findings report, bespoke feedback report, sorry. Overall, it is going to lead to a greatly enhanced user experience for you and for your teams. Those that are doing this, it is a lengthy process, so we want to make it as slick and easy for you as possible. But it is essentially a one-stop shop for all things index. So I'm sure you'll be really looking forward to getting on to that. So there are some other key changes for 2025. It is not just the portal that is going to be different this year. Sorry, excuse me. So the index survey itself, the questionnaire, isn't going to be exactly the same. Obviously, if you've entered before, you'll notice. If you're brand new, then you wouldn't necessarily notice the difference. The changes are generally kept to a minimum. We have really only just made some tweaks. But where we are making the changes, it's because we want to facilitate more accurate answers. So maybe removing some freeform answers and introducing some tick boxes. But also we want to be able to give better feedback. So where employers are doing really well, we've introduced more detailed questions or questions which allow you to give more freeform or detailed answers so that we can then respond to that in turn and give more detailed bespoke feedback. For example, in section 1, that's mostly where we've done that. We also wanted to make the index more relevant for all employers. So, for example, in section 2, we reduced the emphasis on graduate entry schemes as a route into your industries, because we know not all sectors and not all employers necessarily have graduate entry schemes. And then finally, we have reduced data entry. So we are, which I'm sure will be music to a lot of people's ears, but we are, most interested in the actions that you're taking to collect the data and improve the outcomes for colleagues from low socioeconomic backgrounds. So we've decided to focus our questions on these rather than, just examining the makeup of your workforce. If you're doing the right actions, if you're collecting the data, if you're introducing, inclusive recruitment, for example, then the changes to your workforce, profile, will naturally follow. Like I said, the tweaks are they're pretty much all in sections 1 and 2. And then in the rest of the sections, the changes are really just to streamline the survey, remove certain questions, provide more clarity. So pretty minor. So it's mostly sections 1 and 2. The index costs. It costs £1,200 plus VAT to enter, and for that fee, you get your individual feedback report, which goes through all of the information and personalised recommendations for each section. It's quite rigorous. And then in addition to that, if you would like, if you are in financial services, legal sector, or professional services, you can purchase an additional sectoral report which gives trends across your sectors and gives a little bit more of a deep dive on kind of trends that we've seen basically across those areas. It's only available in those sectors. You can pay by credit card, or we will send you an invoice. That is entirely up to you, and we will be in touch about organising that with you ourselves. Okay, so now I'm going to spend a little bit of time running through each of the sections in the questionnaire in a bit more detail, and I'm just going to explain what we're looking for and essentially what the index rewards, give you a sense of where you might want to be placing more emphasis, the kind of information you might want to start thinking about getting ready, or questions you might want to start asking yourself before you submit. Before I do that, just some general reminders. So data is obviously a big part of the index, and the data that you provide will show things like a class pay gap, or not necessarily the best diversity of certain areas of your workforce. So it's important to think about when you're wanting to get the most out of entering and being part of this process, to give as much information as you have, even if it's not, pretty. It will allow us to assess more and give you that really bespoke, meaningful feedback that can help you drive change and support your analysis. The other really important area to think about is about your plans. We can reward or give feedback on intent or things that you have in train that you're going to be doing. So we know that we have a lot of returning entrants who have maybe only just started to implement our feedback from last time. And so that's fine and invaluable to also put into your submission this year, what's in the pipeline, what your plans are as well, because you'll still get marks for that. Remember as well, next thing is that this is obviously focused on social mobility. We do get entries that talk about general diversity improvement initiatives, which are fantastic. And of course, there's a lot of intersectionality and there will be a lot of overlap. But if that is the case, make that really clear in your submission and explain the link to social mobility, because obviously that's the priority of the index. Talk about outcomes as well as activity. So give us some information on your evaluation of activity. It's really good to hear what you've done, but also tell us how it went. Reflect for us on what the initiatives were and how they worked well. They are not going to work the same for every organization. So it's really good to kind of get your thoughts on what does and doesn't work for you. When you receive your feedback later down the line, we'll give you that high-level summary. We'll talk about what you're doing well, where you're performing less well, detailed feedback on where you can improve, and that will really depend on all of this information that you give us and how you've responded to all of the different sections as well. Okay, so let's dive in. What are we looking for in your submission in each of the different sections? So section 1, this is pre-18 outreach and work with young people. So this section, this is where we're looking at how effectively employers target and engage young people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. We're looking at whether your outreach enables young people to make informed and best decisions for them, gives them all of that information. And so that means that the index rewards or places value on, activity that is effective, well-planned, targeted, and also evaluated outreach programs. Like I said, doing that reflection on what works well. This means then that we've changed the format of some of the questions. So we're asking some new questions, but rest assured, we haven't changed what we think good outreach is. So if you've performed well in this section in the past, don't worry, you're not going to do badly now. What good outreach looks like is still the same. It's just that, over the years since we've started the index, we've seen particularly, excellent improvement in outreach work. So now we want to provide that stretch and stretch entrants to improve even further. And so ask slightly different questions so that we can give even better feedback at the end of the day. So for example, to give a flavour of that, we've amended some of the questions to have a stronger focus on examining the intentionality of outreach work, what you're looking to offer, delineating as well between in-person and virtual outreach. There's obviously a big difference there now. We also want to understand the extent to which maybe you're collaborating to deliver outreach with other employers or with, Careers Hub, for example. That makes a big difference. And we also want to examine what you are evaluating rather than purely just how you're evaluating your outreach as well. So all of this designed to sort of test and stretch a little bit further and provide that opportunity for you to give us information that we can respond to directly. Okay, section 2. So in this section, we are looking at how effectively employers engage with young people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds at the very start of the recruitment pipeline. The index rewards employers that make, active efforts to consciously diversify attraction methods and effectively engage with the target audience. So we understand in the past, the focus on university recruitment in this section didn't give, all employers the opportunity to really shine and showcase all of the excellent work that's being done to attract people through, the myriad of entrance routes that there are at the start of the recruitment pipeline. So we want to have a look at, what's the diversity of attraction methods, what's the work that you're doing. We've rephrased some of the questions and introduced new ones to make sure that it's applicable to all employers, regardless of what your recruitment or your talent pipeline looks like. Okay, so section 3, this is recruitment and selection, the recruitment and selection processes. Typically, the best performing employers in the index have systems in place that reward potential and ability over past performance. And you'll be able to demonstrate that you are removing barriers that prevent individuals from lower socioeconomic backgrounds from progressing through to selection, compared with, better off peers. So there aren't major changes in this section. We've removed a number of questions where we had feedback that they weren't applicable to some sectors. And we've also added some more questions on contextual recruitment. Again, that's so that we can give more detailed and effective feedback, looking at what it is that you've done to examine, identify the barriers, examine them, and then remove them and see what those are. Again, that varies across sector, it varies across employer, which is why we want to be able to give that bespoke and respond to specific details and examples. Okay, section 4. So routes into the employer. This section is looking at the steps you're taking to create well-structured, really clear and obvious routes into your organization. So employers that have performed well ensure that all the entry routes are equally accessible to people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, compared with their peers. And they'll also make sure that you're hiring based on potential, and also really importantly that they're being paid fairly as well. Again, with this section, no major changes. We've reduced data entry requirements, but the questions are remaining that will help us understand the different routes that you have available and what they are, and looking at that detail that's specific to you. Okay, section 5, so data collection. In this section, we're examining how employers collect and analyze data to understand the workforce socioeconomic profile. So it's not just having the socioeconomic profile of your workforce, it's actually looking at companies that collect data and analyze it specifically to drive change. So what you're doing to collect the data, but also how you're actually using it, rather than just this is the makeup of the organization. We know there are going to be socioeconomic diversity problems, across the board. We want to look at understanding positive actions that you're taking to improving outcomes, and what those look like, and what that essentially means off the back of your own analysis that you've done of the data. Section 6, this is pay, progression and retention. So in this section, we are exploring how equally remunerated and supported employees are in their roles. So how supported they are to progress through the organisation compared with their peers from other socioeconomic backgrounds. Typically then, employers who perform well in this area, they'll have explored the impact of socioeconomic background on pay, also progression, also retention, so all three in the organisation. And then we'd really like to know if you've implemented support to employees from lower socioeconomic backgrounds to allow them to thrive. Again, that's going to look different across different organisations, across different sectors. We really want to know what you've done and what works best, and your reflections on that's specific and unique to you. So we've seen really recently, actually, a lot of really good work that firms are doing in collecting class pay gap data. We've seen a really big jump up in the number of firms that are actually starting to do this, which is fantastic. So again, similar to section 1, we've added some more questions on this to try and understand how you're using that data, what the longer term strategies are in place to affect change, to really bring that stretch, and means then that we can respond appropriately and provide the level of detail and feedback on that to keep pushing you basically, and keep doing more. Section 7, so this is culture and internal advocacy. So this is about the strategies that you have in place to create an inclusive workplace culture, employers that do well in this area have undertaken robust, substantial exercises to really understand the experiences of people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds in the organisation, really listening to the voices of colleagues from lower socioeconomic backgrounds and amplifying those voices, involving them in decisions, in strategies, and as well complementing that with, really importantly, senior buy-in for those longer term social mobility strategies as well. Again, lots of really great work that we've seen, and a real kind of breadth and depth of initiatives. So again, looking at what those are and making sure that we're giving that kind of appropriate feedback to those as well, because it will be different across different employers and different sectors based on what you're doing. Then the final section, last but obviously not least, we have external advocacy, which is a really, really important one in the index. So in this section, it's about what you're doing to improve social mobility outcomes, not just internally, not just in your organisation, not just at your own firm, but actually looking across the sector, looking across the wider UK, and acting as that kind of making a stand trailblazer for social mobility. So those that have performed really well in this section in the past will leverage their influence to encourage external stakeholders to act on social mobility. Maybe that's clients, maybe that's your network, maybe that's other employers that you work with on a day-to-day basis, and actually thinking about how you contribute to social mobility initiatives, how you get involved, maybe how you set things up in your sector, and also beyond, thinking about the bigger picture and the context of what we're doing in the UK, really being part of that bigger movement and acting as a voice and using your influence as well. So this is a really exciting section, and we're seeing a lot of innovation here as well, which is fantastic. Okay, so enough of me. I promised that we would leave plenty of time for questions, so we've got about 20 minutes. Really want to make sure that we're hearing from you. I can actually see we've already got loads of questions in the Q&A, which is brilliant. We really want to use this time to respond to what it is you want to know more about and hear us talk about in more detail. So I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by my colleagues Esther Fisher and Sophie Roach. They are our policy experts here at the SMF. They've worked on those tweaks to the questionnaire, and also they will be doing the benchmarking and looking at all of your submissions over the summer. So they really are the people to ask if you've got any burning questions. So I'm going to hand over actually straight to Sophie. I know you've already been collating them, and just ask that, yeah, we're going to run for the next 20 minutes, and then I'll just do a quick 5 minutes at the end to wrap up. But yes, over to Sophie and Esther, and thanks so much everybody for all of your questions, I can see.
Thanks, Ellie. Hi, everybody. Yeah, I'm Sophie. I'm the Senior Policy Officer, and I'll be sort of facilitating this question and answer section of the webinar. Esther and I have been collating all of your questions, and hopefully we'll be able to answer as many of them as possible in the next 20 minutes. So kicking things off, one of the questions that we have had was weighted grade expectations have often been discussed. How have people found implementing these in practice? Esther, do you want to take that one, please?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this one would be a great one to throw out to the floor, but in the interest of time, I'll say that if anyone on this call does, as an employer, have examples of this, then please do get in touch, and I can hopefully then link you up with the person that asked this question. But I would say that from the university sector, there are some really good examples of where this is being done. And so there are a couple of different ways that you can do it. Some universities are taking GCSEs and A-level grades and then putting them in the context of the exact school where they were obtained and the exact cohort and year, all from freely available government data. And then they calculate if that student has over or underperformed compared to that school, which is a really nice approach because it's a way of making sure that all students are included in the contextualization. Other universities take a bit more of a blanket and actually quicker approach, which is just saying we're going to make 3 A's equivalent to 3 B's if a student hits certain requirements. So, for example, has a free school meals indicator. And some universities do a bit of a mix and put both of those in place. So yeah, there's a lot of kind of practice that's already been done in the university sector for the last couple of years. Yeah, and it's quite an interesting, interesting space.
Great, thanks, Esther. So second question is how many organisations registered for the index in 2024. I'll take that one. So we had about 150 organisations entering the index in 2024. And then I had another question, Esther, this one will be for you, is how long does it take to complete the survey?
Good question. And probably annoyingly, my answer is going to say that it really does depend on the organization. So we have big organizations with, thousands of employees and some that are very, very small. And so I think that would factor into the time it takes. But something that I think is hopefully good things, we've significantly reduced data entry requirements. We had quite a lot of feedback from employers over the last year or so, saying that was kind of very, very burdensome and took a lot of time. And we've reviewed whether or not we can get the same information that we need in a different way, and we think we can. So that should hopefully speed up the time. But I would also encourage employers to take as much time as they can answering this, especially where we have qualitative questions. We're asking you to give examples of things that you do. It's really helpful to take the time to answer that and really evidence them, so that we can understand the actions you're doing and mark those accurately. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Esther. I can see there's a lot more questions coming in now as well, so we'll try and get through as many as possible. There was a question about whether it's free to enter the index. So as Ellie said, the cost is £1,200 plus VAT. And the exception to this is if you are a charity or if you have fewer than 50 employees. Okay, so if you're a charity or if you have fewer than 50 employees, then it is free to enter the index. And then the second part of the same question, which I'll answer, is that whether or not this is just, if you're a global business, whether or not this is just purely for the UK. And we do have many entrants that are global businesses, but as long as you have a UK-based employees, then the index will still be relevant for you. Right, Esther, I'm going to have a little look. What question should we go for next? Oh, this is a good one for you, Esther. We had a question that said, a bit of clarification, I think, on some of the changes that we've made. It's where you said it will not be the same as previous years to facilitate more accurate answers. Could we just explain that a little bit more?
Ooh, so I think that is referring to questions around the data entry, and so that was where we realised that it was really burdensome for employers to do that, but also that people were interpreting data and interpreting those questions in slightly different ways, or had different ways of collecting the data, which meant that it wasn't actually that accurate when we looked at it as a whole. So we've come up with different ways of asking questions, which are typically now around processes that you might have around data collection rather than the actual numbers themselves. So that helps us to understand how you're doing these things, how well you're doing in those spaces, and hopefully to give you more accurate feedback based on that.
Great, thank you. And then there's another question that you'd like to answer, which is a link to the questions that are being asked. It says, is there equal weighting between the sections, Esther?
I've probably just accidentally started clicking on some of them. So I'm just going to keep my hands here. Actually, so no, there isn't equal weightings on the sections. So we weight different sections and actually some of the answers within them as well, depending on the relative importance of an action for social mobility. So if we think that some sections or particular actions are really good or really bad for social mobility, whichever one it might be, then we might weight them more or less within the mark scheme.
Okay, great, thank you. So we've got a question here about Esther, I think this might be another one for you. It's about young people and outreach. And does the new questionnaire include activities that may be supporting those considered NEET? So not in education or employment or training.
Yes, that is a good question. Yeah, so we've changed sections 1 and 2 are the areas where we've made most of the changes. It's still not going to be huge. So if you're sitting there thinking, oh my God, like we did really well in those areas, we might not next year. That's not why we've made those changes. But what we've done is kind of to try and broaden it out a little bit more. So section 1, for example, well, actually both of them, we're not just looking at schools and universities, but trying to understand the breadth of the activities that you do through different community groups, could be through schools, and also with students that, as you say, could be not in education or formal training settings. So yes, and I think I saw a similar question somewhere around recruitment. I can't find it exactly, but it was somewhere around recruitment and whether or not the questions were for only aged 18, 19 plus. And the answer is no. So we've also included recognised recruitment with younger students as well, and people in apprenticeship schemes and things like that.
Great, thank you. So we've had a great question, which is about how you can prepare between now and the 11th of March, which is when the portal opens. So from mid-February, you'll be able to access our new portal and you'll be able to read the resources of FAQs, which will provide lots more information and sort of things, prompts to get you thinking and starting to get prepared. You can take a look at the Social Mobility Commission's website to help prepare as well, and you can start to speak to your colleagues in relevant departments. And that will all sort of stand you in good stead for being ready to begin your application on the 11th of March. Okay, and then we've just had another question, which is someone who's a bit concerned if you don't have all of the information or data to complete all of the sections. Esther, this one's for you. Can they still submit?
Yes, absolutely. So we actually know that some of the questions you might feel aren't relevant for you, and so you don't need to answer those questions, and the mark scheme does account for that. There may be some sections even where you can't answer them. So a good example would be if you're working in the alcohol industry, you may not be able to answer questions around the work that you do with young people for legal reasons. So it's absolutely fine not to answer those questions. We will give feedback for all sections. We might give you best practice if you haven't put anything in that section. So some employers might not enter a section because they haven't started working in that area yet, but even then we would still give you some kind of pointers as to how you can get started. But yeah, you can, like, hopefully as many questions as possible will be applicable to as many firms as possible, but if they aren't, then you don't need to answer them and worry about the implications of that. And if there are some that you just don't want to answer, then that's absolutely fine too.
Great, thank you, Esther. Another great question, I'm going to take this one, is what is included in the £1,200 plus VAT price? So just so you're aware, we will review and mark your questionnaire submissions and place you within the index. And remember, you get to choose whether or not you'll be public or anonymous. Of course, if you do place highly, we'd love to celebrate that with you and for you to sort of promote that. We'll also provide you with feedback, so you will each get an individual feedback report, which is where we identify areas that we think you're doing well in and areas that you need to improve. And then this gets sent out to you and highlights those sort of areas of success and opportunities to develop. Quite a technical question here, Esther, is under Section 8, would the supply chain come under this as part of our commercial and procurement activity?
Yes, absolutely. That's a short and sweet answer.
Okay, great. Okay, next one. Is it suitable for small organisations and charities? Yes, short answer is yes. Slightly longer answer is that whilst many of the employers in the top 75 are big organisations with large resources, there's still plenty that smaller organisations can do to improve social mobility and socioeconomic diversity. Changes in practice don't have to be expensive and can lead to sort of real benefits for all different types of organisations. So, for example, a quick win, a sort of easier thing to implement for smaller organisations is removing the requirements to have a degree for most roles is free, and organisations that have done this they tell us that it's had positive benefits in terms of the performance of their employees. And some things might be even easier for smaller organisations to do compared to larger ones. For example, decision makers might be slightly more visible and able to encourage data collection, okay, which is one of the first steps towards making an index submission, okay, having that visibility and that buy-in. So hopefully, okay. Esther, question for you, unless you want to jump in.
No, go for it.
Is, do we have to enter the index every year?
No, no, you don't. I mean, it's great if you do, and I think we can then give you updated kind of information on what you're doing. But there are firms that can't enter each year for different reasons, and that's absolutely fine. So if you didn't enter last year, but you entered the year before and thinking, oh, can we come back in? Is it too late? Then it absolutely is fine. And I guess on a follow on, I've seen two questions that are possibly similar in terms of can we get feedback on changes that we made from last year? So if you are re-entering, then the answer to that is yes. So we having added a new section, a new question at the end of each section, which allows you to put in any innovative work that you feel may not have been covered by other questions in the section, because we do recognise that can happen. But it's also an opportunity to tell us about any changes that you are making and have made in that section from last year.
Esther, another one for you. Is organisation size taken into account when scoring?
Yes. No, I'm not. Sorry, I thought I was on mute for a minute. Yes, so we do recognise that there will be very different challenges depending on what size of organisation, challenges and opportunities, I should say, actually, depending on what size of organisation you are. So yes, we do take that into account.
Great, thank you. In terms of, so we had a question about people, I think this is from one of our potential new entrants for 2025. And they've asked for this, for those of us right at the start of the journey, are there any examples of what good looks like?
I feel like I might be fobbing everyone off in terms of, oh, it's so difficult depending on the different sector you are. So that we can share examples of what good might look like. But it really does depend on what size organization you are and also what sector you're in and where exactly you are in your journey. So as I mentioned before about so some people have entered the index in the past and haven't actually submitted any information in any section, and that's where we would send you effective practice on this is what good could look like in this space. Obviously, the more information you can give us, the better. And I would say, like, if you are at the beginning of your journey and you think, oh my God, we're going to look awful, don't worry about it. So we know that there are organizations that are in that space, and that's okay. You can enter two things. Is you can enter anonymously. So if you're concerned about where you're going to place and how that's going to look, you can enter anonymously, because what's important to us is that you care about the feedback we give you and you really try and implement that. So if you're right at the beginning of your journey and you think we're not doing that well, but you answer all the sections as much as you can, then we'll be able to give you feedback that's relevant to your context on those specific questions.
Great, thank you, Esther. There was a question about data and about what data is sort of essential. So I didn't know if you wanted to go through that.
Yeah, and there's a similar question around concerns around kind of redacting data and kind of GDPR concerns. So I'd say that, again, this comes back to the reduction in data questions that we have asked. I would say that no data is essential other than, well, no quantitative data is essential. So the more you can give us, the more accurate our feedback will be. But for those questions, but there are some questions where ultimately you may not be able to say how many. So this would be an example actually for a small firm, might not be able to capture accurately the number of employees that you have applying to certain things or whatever it is, and that's absolutely fine. So we have tried to refocus some of the questions to understand much more about the processes and actions you're taking as opposed to the data itself. And we also recognize that specifically with data, and again, this is an issue that smaller organizations have reported, like, can fluctuate up and down, which is why we have refocused slightly.
Okay, thank you. Right, let's go for this is a great question, actually. So it's about linking people with similar organizations or sectors so that we can share ideas.
Yeah, that's a really great question. I say it's something that we don't currently do it as we don't have a network, which I think there's another question here that I've just spotted that's similar. We don't currently have those networks, but what we definitely would always try to do is, if someone asks us a question and we don't think we know the answer, or we think, oh, actually there's some really best practice over here, then we can always try and share that. But obviously we do work within the restrictions of data protection. So the information that you tell us in the index is confidential. And so we would never sort of share your response with another organization without asking. So we can try and link organizations together. We don't do it on a kind of regular basis, but it is something that we're absolutely considering.
Okay, thank you, Esther. I think this is quite a good one, especially for people who may not have entered before, which is about how can an organisation sort of align colleagues internally to support their submission. I don't know, Esther, if you wanted to take that one.
Yeah, I think this it could be read in two different ways. So if you mean to support approval of the submission beforehand, then we can absolutely support in making either the business case or the moral case for entering the index. And so do just get in contact with us, and our team will get back to you and help with that. If it's around once you're starting your submission, we have, so I think there's 3 months to answer the questions, and that's partly in recognition that you may need to go to other departments to get some of the responses, and so the questions can be downloaded and shared more widely around the organisation. And I should say, because we are coming to the end, I think, of the question time, but there's loads of questions that are on here, and I don't think we've had time to answer them all. What we will do is we will go through them and we'll try and put them into an FAQs section, so that hopefully these questions will be answered, because I'm really sorry that we haven't had time to get through them all.
Yeah, definitely. I think sort of building on yeah, it's a point that you just made as well. There's been a few questions about sort of, I know we've answered about how long it takes, etc. And whether the questions will be available for download in March, and there is a 3-month window to answer them. So that's plenty of time to sort of get your application together. And I hope that addresses some of the questions that we've had about how long it takes, but also when the questions will be available. We've been really mindful that 3 months is quite a long amount of time, and that's a good amount of time to sort of pull your submission together. Okay, so we've come to the end of the question and answer part of the webinar, so I'm going to hand over to Ellie just to finish.
Thank you, and thank you so much, Sophie and Esther. That was amazing, and thank you so much for all the fantastic questions as well. It was good to get a good, a good deep dive into some of the specifics. So thank you so much, everybody. So just to sum up then, and probably just to reiterate some of what Sophie was just saying, the timeline for 2025. So you can register your interest now on the website, and that means you'll be on our mailing list. So we will then alert you to when the portal goes live in the middle of Feb. So at that point, when the portal goes live, you can access it, you'll see the FAQs, and you'll be able to see all the resources and get familiar with it. It won't be until the 11th of March, when the index is open for submissions, that you'll be able to see the actual questionnaire. But then you will then have that 3 months to input all of the data and get your submission ready. And there's obviously lots of things you can do to get ready before then, as Esther and Sophie were saying, once you can kind of be on the mailing list and have a look at the portal as well before you can actually do the survey. And then once you've submitted after June, it's over to us to do all the marking of the submissions and the benchmarking. You'll get the feedback and your provisional ranking in October, before the kind of launch of the top 75 in November. So make sure you're on the mailing list, look out for lots of information from us, look out for when the portal will be ready in the middle of Feb. And yeah, good luck with the submissions. If you've got any questions, anything at all, a follow-up to today, you want to put in touch with somebody, you want some more info, please don't hesitate. We are on hand to help. It's employerindex@socialmobility.org.uk is the email address. And I'm sure we'll all be in touch and speaking to you again very soon. But thanks so much for joining us today. It was absolutely lovely to get all your questions, and really looking forward to speaking to you again as part of your social mobility journeys. But thank you so much, and goodbye, everybody.